All right. Welcome back. I'm here with a great friend, Teresa Fearis. Teresa, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Al. How are you?
I'm doing well. And Anika, yeah, thank you for being here. You Chief Data Scientist. You got some things going on there at Unmind. Love the well-being topic for obvious reasons. Here we are in this pandemic. It's been a big concern for organizations. There's been a lot of talk to it, but how to measure it, how to respond appropriately, how to enable it over time is, an exciting topic that I know you're going to jump into. So I'm going to get out of your way for a bit. If you would introduce yourselves a little bit more and get into it, and I'll join you in a few minutes for the Q&A. That work?
Thank you. That sounds great.
Right.
I'll do a quick intro now, and perhaps when I hand over to Anika, she can give you a bit more of a background to her role. As Al mentioned, COVID-19 has really accelerated the growth of Unmind. I joined in December, and really just so thrilled to be part of the Unmind family. As Al mentioned, we are focused on mental health, the kind of support of and proactive support of mental health. And we believe that just like dental and physical health, we all have mental health all of the time. So just like dental health and physical health, there are clinically backed ways to improve it. So we kind of consider ourselves in many ways to be the toothbrush for the mind. We exist for this mission and vision, and I think that inspires us every single day when we hear from our users how we've been able to enable this. And we know, because we're a workplace mental health platform, that employers are increasingly willing to support their employees' mental health, but the traditional approaches are just not working. They tend to be more reactive. They tend to be stigmatized, have low uptake and limited success. So we're going to share with you some of the approaches that we're taking to try and improve on traditional approaches by recognizing the value of a proactive, preventative approach and leveraging digital technology through mobile apps that can really be, accessible for employees across organizations. Just to illustrate the problem that we're facing right now, and a lot of employers are facing, is that 1 in 6 of employees will experience some form of mental health issue. In fact, the latest data, sadly, is showing that's probably more like 1 in 4, and 70% of leaders believe that they have barriers in terms of providing support for their employees. So in addition to the human impact and the financial impact that's being very well published right now, the imagery is just so negative, and most solutions focus in that 1 in 6, kind of the more reactive or clinical or acute problems, and the language is just really doom and gloom. So, our belief is that mental health has become almost synonymous with mental ill health, and when a problem arises for an employee, while there are some great reactive services like EAPs or PMIs or other health services, we need to really move beyond that and focus on mental health for the 6 in 6. Consider it as a spectrum that we as human beings constantly move along. Where we sit will depend on what's happening in our personal lives and professional lives. We don't go to bed one day fine and wake up the next morning with clinical depression. We can all be on that spectrum all of the time. So we're working with companies who are more forward-thinking and progressive in terms of focusing on not just the reactive care, but also proactive care, and supporting their people further upstream, preventing them from falling over in the first place rather than being there to pick them up. We use very positive, destigmatizing language, and you'll see that in the index that Anika will explore more with you. And that's really a really important pillar of our approach, the Unmind Index, so that we can actually measure what is happening across our user base. It's a unique self-report measure of mental health, providing a kind of individualized overview of functioning, driving those recommended personalized platform content. So it's very much aligned with our principle of early intervention, helps us to identify those that may have clinical problems and signpost them to further support. And we have over 100 customers now using the platform, with 2.5 million employees that have access to it. So a lot of good data and rich data sets to look at. And I'm going to hand over to Anika now to introduce herself and share with you some of the insights from our Unmind Index. Over to you, Anika.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So the Unmind Index. If you click on the next slide. So basically, we understand the Unmind Index as a trusted roadmap. So it's a 26-item questionnaire that we have on our platform. And above all, really, it should be informative and empowering to our users. So we want to monitor symptoms, and in this way the Unmind Index is quite unique because we do capture like the full spectrum of mental health. So we measure symptoms of mental ill health, but we also look at indicators of positive well-being. We also want to detect problems, and even though the index is not a diagnostic tool, but it correlates highly with like clinically diagnostic tools. And also we really want to empower our users to make choices and to know what to do on our platform and what content to engage with. We provide tailored feedback on the symptoms that the users report. And if you click again, yeah, it's that this tailored feedback comes instantly after the user fills out the index, and it's very easy to interpret. And again, as I mentioned, the idea is really to empower the individuals to make choices regarding which content of the platform they want to engage in, and which we triage them to different features that we have, or we also guide them to any offline support if this is what is needed. So we validated the index on a UK population in collaboration with University of Cambridge and our head of psychology, Heather, and Marcus, our principal researcher. And we're currently writing up the article for publication. Also, we are planning to validate the index in the US and Australia. Great. Thanks, Teresa. Next one. So yeah, so the index now, just to get a bit into more detail. So we conceptualize well-being as a construct that is comprised of 7 subfactors, and this was a data-driven approach. So while we validated the study in 1,000 individuals in the UK, we looked at what factors can we extract, and we explored the 7 factors, or identified 7 factors, which is sleep, health, happiness, fulfillment, coping, connection, and calmness. And you might notice the wording here. So we don't talk about depression, but we talk about happiness. We don't call it stress, we say it's coping. And we also don't talk about anxiety, but we talk about calmness. And this is really here again to stress the fact that our aim is to destigmatize mental health and to really positively word no matter where we are on the spectrum of mental health. And just to mention, it's a bi-factor model, meaning that we have a generalized factor of well-being where we have all the items loading on, and then the 7 sub-constructs. Yeah, cool. Now to some insights. So I'm going to give you some high-level insights into how well-being is reported depending on the company size, depending on industry, but also over time in 2020. So first, well-being across company size. So as you see here, we do see quite an interesting pattern of the larger the organizations, the lower the well-being score that is reported by the respective employees. And we see these in particular in large clients. We bucket them as strategic in the segment. And this is in particular driven by subfactors such as calmness and sleep. Whereas in mid-market, which are like smaller clients, we see really high levels of well-being, and in particular in domains such as fulfillment. So what's interesting here that these patterns also align with the uptake that we see depending on these segments. So we do see lower uptake in strategic clients, whereas mid-market we see the highest uptake. And there could be several reasons for this. It could be that in larger organizations there might be a different atmosphere when it comes to well-being. There might be a different type of connection. It might also be that the higher uptake also shows people are using the app and therefore reporting higher well-being. So there's many factors to consider. So we also, when we look at well-being across industries, and we're only showing here industries where we have more than 4 clients in order to make some meaningful, comprise some meaningful averages. And the error bars you see here on the graph, the bar plots, are confidence intervals. So we do see that manufacturing reports a really high well-being overall. And this is in particular, we see this in constructs such as coping and calmness and health. If you look at retail, you do notice that there's a really, really low well-being compared to the other industries. But this is in this particular data set driven by the fact that we do have quite a few strategic clients in the retail industry. And if you factor this out, then we actually don't see much difference in retail compared to other industries. And again, there's many different ways we can also interpret this or speculate, like building hypotheses. We're really keen of also exploring more when it comes to demographics, different salary bandings, also different type of work, because in each industry, individuals can work in office work or can work in frontline. So it really depends on that as well. But it might be that in manufacturing, it might be the manual work. You can easily leave work at home, but it can also be the manufacturing has always championed health and safety as well as compliance. And at the moment, with the insecurity and the uncertainties of COVID and the pandemic of returning to work, this might also be a factor. But it's highly speculative. It's just something that we are exploring further at the moment. When it comes to well-being over time, what we do see in our user population, and the graph has to interpret it with a bit of caution, because it's not that we have monitored one user base, one user sample over 2020, but this is a snapshot of our user population with different users, potentially different clients over the course of 2020. And as you see here in the dotted line is the onset of the UK lockdown. And even though this is data of all our global clients, we do have quite a few UK clients in this pool. And also the course over 2020 when it came to the pandemic might have been quite similar in various countries. So we do see quite a drop in well-being when, like, around March, as well as again towards the second lockdown, which is marked again on a dotted line. There's also seasonal trends, of course, like in the summer as well as in the winter, where we do see a potential pattern here when it comes to the pandemic. And in particular, even more pronounced when we look at the different subconstructs. So as you see, connection is really high here on this scale. This is also due, or very likely due, to the fact that it is a very socially desirable construct, meaning users tend to answer socially desirable, so they score really highly. So it's a skewed scale. It's something currently we're looking at. Well, you see in particular when it comes to the UK lockdown that were in place in March, that calmness really plummets, and it really goes down in comparison to sleep and health, that we actually see going up as in the same time frame. So that's quite interesting. And again, for the second lockdown, we see a similar pattern. Now, again, just to show this in a more cleaner way, again, we have, like, over 2020 on average, connection was the highest reported scale. And when we look at the lowest factors that we see in our user population, we do have sleep, fulfillment, and calmness. And this also is aligned with the check-in feeling. So we do have another feature on the app where people can, like, easily check in and report their feelings. And one of the most commonly reported feelings is tired, anxious, and then content. So it's something to, again, speculate around social connections during the pandemic as well. Is that something that became in particular relevant during this pandemic, and is potentially that people are more aware and conscious of what they have. And so it's, just really keen on supporting our users with the app and the content we have on it when it comes to these particular domains of well-being. Now, just a bit of outlook. So what we plan to do also with the Unmind Index, we want to validate it globally, because there are many factors, like cultural factors in different communities, that do influence how people respond, how individuals interpret a question, how it's worded. So we want to validate this in every country that Unmind is used. And we also want to continue to improve it. So we're looking into adaptive testing, where we actually only show certain items to users, so it's even shortened and more personalized in that way. And I'm going to hand over back to Teresa, who's going to talk a bit about the outlook regarding partnerships.
Thanks, Anika. So some really interesting findings there that we're keen to dig into and understand more. In terms of how partnerships can help us get there and advance this ROI, we're looking at being able to integrate more seamlessly with HR dashboards, so we can actually look at how the index and what's trending and the content that's consumed can actually impact things like absenteeism, presenteeism, retention. We're definitely aware that they can have an impact, and we want to be able to track that more closely. Also, things that we're looking at are other business metrics. And in addition to that, we'll be looking at how we can pull in other data from physical and perhaps dental health to try and correlate those also with what we're finding within our user base. We have dashboards already for our super users, which typically are kind of HR benefits, and they can see what's happening within their organizations. But the ability to be able to connect that with HR data and business metrics is key for us throughout this year. So we'll be looking at partnerships there. I come from an SAP SuccessFactors background, so of course I'm going to be looking at HR systems, but also employee engagement surveys and other leading indicators of employee experience. So we've talked a lot about the kind of quantitative data that sits behind the platform and what we can learn from that and hypothesize and how we can use that to really try and not just impact the users themselves, but also help inform employers around their mental well-being or general well-being strategies by using that data. But one thing that really makes us feel the warm and fuzzies on a daily basis is having feedback from our users. And I'll let you consume these at your own pace, but we do have a Slack channel which in real time shares data and feedback that we get from our end users in the platform. And, when you see what impact we're able to have and how we can use this data for good within our own platform, it really does make you feel kind of fulfilled and inspired and wanting to continue the work that we're doing to impact lives. We have a very bold ambition to impact 10 million people's lives through the platform, and we are well on our way to doing that. And we just wanted to share some of the feedback with you today so you can see that in addition to the quantitative data, we have some really nice qualitative data, which is helping us to understand the impact that we're having at the individual level. So we wanted to leave some time for questions. And here are our contact details. A plug here, we are actually hiring into our data team. So if anyone out there is interested in learning more about that, you can go to our website. I feel like we have a position for an analytics engineer, just went up today. So please go check that out. And Al, over to you for any questions that may have come through.
Well, I will say that it definitely went up today. So I'm, because I'm going to be one if I only had another life. First off, congratulations, and we'll only have time for a few questions here. Anika, there's one in the Q&A section. If you don't mind, toggling over to that, because that'll definitely go to you. But I'm going to ask the first question to Teresa. Teresa, I will say, and I hope you won't be embarrassed by this, but you were a very hot commodity. Sorry to put it in those terms, but you had a lot of options in terms of where you could have gone for your next step. And so you and I talked, briefly, or maybe not briefly, on occasion, and you kept coming back to Unmind. And so you then eventually made the decision. Why? Of all the opportunities that are out there, why did Unmind speak to you so personally?
Yeah, it was an interesting journey because there was no job at the beginning of the conversation. So we created that. I was desperate to be part of the Unmind family. When you talk to Dr. Nick, who is our founder, when you talk to anyone in the company, there is one single goal, and I mentioned it, is to impact 10 million people's lives. And when you're in alliances or partnerships, you know that part of your role is to kind of maybe court a potential acquirer. No one was talking about exit strategy. It was simply, if we do this really well, everything else will follow. And I'm literally getting goosebumps just talking about it. The culture is so embedded. Everyone has a story, a way that they came to Unmind that is just very transformational. And I think that kind of is part of our DNA, and we're already seeing the impact that we're having, and we want to continue doing that. So I just couldn't say turn it down, because I kind of crafted the job in the first place. But yeah, so happy to be here.
Well, yeah, staying on that theme before you answer that question, Anika, one of the things that I've spoken about and others have also echoed is the fact that, particularly when I started in this discipline nearly 20 years ago now, it was really about delivering insight to senior leaders so they could make decisions on how to improve processes, maybe improve the culture, what have you. The value proposition back to the individual who was actually generating the data wasn't even, frankly, thought of. And now we're in this place where, oh gosh, as an individual, I'm generating all this data, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, and oftentimes I don't benefit, and sometimes I'm not even being asked. And so what I'm seeing here is that, hey, I'm generating data and I'm benefiting, and the organization can benefit, others can benefit, but first and foremost, the value proposition comes to me. Anika, is that the way you're looking at it? Did I play that back accurately?
Yeah, 100%. I think one really important factor that we all value is transparency. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, we're obviously keen to personalize the app further and to also use, for instance, recommendation systems where we can look at what have the user listen to, what did they find useful, what can we recommend. But we really want to make this transparent and to really have the user understand we're collecting this data in order to improve the value this product can have, and not to do anything else with it, basically. So it's really always to have the value of the individual in mind when we work with data.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And as we close, do you want to take James' question real quick? How many questions in the index, and the validation you talked to, but more of from a, and I'm going to frame this in my own way, how labor intensive is it from an individual perspective? So, that relates to how many items.
Yeah, I mean, there was also another question around, because well-being is a broad concept, and how we actually included the factors. So basically, we started off, to keep it short, we basically had a huge item pool, and this was generated with our head of psychology, with a massive literature review. We worked with 6 clinical experts who had more than 10 years experience in the field. They were rating each individual item, so we got, in that sense, expert ratings. Got this back. We first threw all items into our first validation study, and we did an exploratory factor analysis, and we looked at how many factors does the data tell us, and it's eventually came down to these 7 factors that we then constructed, and we narrowed down the items more and more, because it's a trade-off between product and research, right? Ideally, we would want to have 60 items maybe to really capture it fully, but that's just not feasible for a product especially a digital product. So we ended up doing 26 questions, which still held reliability and still had concurrent validity, meaning with external measures. And we have all this data around the reliability, retest reliability we're currently running, as well as the validity measures, the external ones. And we're publishing this in a study, and we are planning to submit this end of February. So you know how it all goes with research, but the plan is that.
We'll look out for it. And so I just want to highlight something, and then Teresa, I'll give you the final word here. We've been talking not only for the past day and a half, but really for the past year and years, is if we have the discussion with our internal customers, not only the leaders, but the employees themselves, we identify need. Then it invites the question, do we have the data and analytics to fill that need? Oftentimes the answer is no. So well-being obviously is top of mind, yet much of the legacy data is grossly inappropriate to determine whether or not people are well, or even enable them to be more healthy and control that to some extent or influence it. So what I'm hearing with you all is that, hey, there's this massive gap between the data that has been generated historically to the needs that have become all the more prominent given the pandemic. So I just want to, honor your creativity in bringing this forward. And, as much as we, want to get insight and ideas out of our existing, HRMS systems and learning systems, I mean, this is a level of openness, open-mindedness that, and creativity that we have to employ to meet the needs of the day and the future. I got on my soapbox right there. Sorry about that. So, Teresa, if you would, how can people learn more about you and Unmind?
Sure. So, and by the way, thank you everyone who's contributed to the chat. I can tell this is a passionate topic, and there are a lot of people who are dealing with this right now, whether it's themselves or members of their family, and I think we can all relate to this. So yeah, please follow us on unmind.com. We have webinars constantly for users, but also for the public, and for people within HR benefits who are actually trying to manage this within their organizations day to day. So we have pride in what we're doing. We want to share it with as many people as possible. So unmind.com for all information, and you've got contact details for Anika and I if you have any other questions relating to the index or any other measures that we have within the tool. And thanks again for this opportunity.
Of course. Thank you both. Be well.
Thanks so much.
Hey.
Bye-bye.